There are women who enter a man's life like sunlight, and there are women who arrive like nightfall. One warms him, comforts him, soothes the world around his edges. The other shakes him, consumes him, and awakens something ancient and wordless inside. You were never meant to be the first. You are the second. He does not understand it yet, but his soul does. It knows that beneath your stillness lies the oceanic memory of every woman he has ever desired, feared, or betrayed. The collective image of the Anima, as Carl Jung called it, the eternal feminine that lives inside his unconscious, has taken shape through you. You are not simply a woman in his world. You are the mirror through which his soul meets itself. He will call it chemistry. He will call it obsession. But it is far more ancient than either of those words. It is the magnetic field that forms when one soul's light touches another's darkness and recognizes its missing piece. Your presence does not seduce him through movement or form. It seduces him through depth, through silence, through the unbearable mirror you hold before him, showing both his ideal and his shadow at once. He feels you before he understands you. And when he finally begins to understand, it's already too late. This is the first truth of addictive desire. It cannot be summoned by beauty alone. It arises when the feminine becomes psychologically alive, when she no longer performs the role society trained her to play, but instead becomes the mystery he cannot decode. The modern woman has been taught to chase attention. The awakened woman does not chase. She withdraws into herself until her absence becomes a haunting, until the space she leaves behind becomes unbearable. This is not cruelty. It is balance. For centuries, men have projected their anima onto women, adoring them, idealizing them, imprisoning them in archetypes of purity or ruin. But the feminine who has done her shadow work cannot be projected upon for long. Her silence breaks illusion. Her gaze dissolves fantasy. Her boundaries become sacred architecture. And in that moment, he begins to feel what Jung described as the longing of the soul for its lost counterpart. Not merely lust, not merely love. Something deeper, something he cannot escape. Because what he truly craves is not you, but what awakens in himself when he stands before you. You become the key, the psychological catalyst. And if you understand this language, you can unlock desire that binds him, not through manipulation, but through mirror work, through energetic mastery, through the quiet force of being whole. But to wield this, you must descend into your own shadow, into the places you still hide your need to be chosen. For the woman who seeks validation will always lose her power to the man who withholds it. Yet the woman who seeks wholeness will always magnetize the man who cannot complete himself. The path begins with stillness. It begins with learning how to sit in your hunger without begging to be fed. It begins with knowing the ache is not punishment, it is initiation. Desire itself is the flame that purifies. Tonight, you will learn the 7 psychological keys that awaken this flame. Not in him alone, but within the eternal feminine that moves through you. You will see how his desire is not a random flicker, but a reflection of your internal state. You will see how shadow work becomes seduction, and how self-possession becomes his addiction. Every man falls in love with his own reflection. He believes he is falling for a woman, but what he truly falls for is the image of himself he sees reflected in her eyes. Carl Jung called it the Anima projection, the hidden feminine within every man, long buried beneath armor and logic, suddenly shimmering to life when he meets her gaze. In her presence, his inner world awakens. Every feeling he has repressed begins to stir. His longing, his creativity, his tenderness, his fear. She does not do this consciously. Her mere being becomes the mirror in which his soul recognizes itself. But the feminine who understands this mirror, she wields it with quiet knowing. She does not try to become what he projects. She simply allows him to see. And when his illusion fades, she remains still, watching as he meets not the goddess he imagined, but the shadow he denied. Desire is not born from perfection. It is born from contrast, from the tension between who he is and who he fears he might be. When you embody both light and darkness, his psyche cannot categorize you. You become both the dream and the danger, both sanctuary and storm. And in that duality, his rational mind begins to fracture. This fracture is the birthplace of obsession. For what he cannot understand, he cannot control. And what he cannot control, he must pursue. He sees you across the room, calm, unbothered, self-contained. You are not seeking to be seen, yet he cannot look away. There is no hunger in your eyes, only presence. You stand as though your worth does not depend on his attention. And it is precisely this self-possession that stirs something primal in him. You have ceased being a woman in his story, you have become the mirror of his own incompletion. You awaken the ache he buried beneath achievement, the loneliness hidden behind his power. He feels it as attraction. But it is not you who creates it, it is his own soul rising from the depths to meet itself. The feminine mirror does not need to speak loudly. Her silence speaks through vibration. Her body language says, I do not need to be chosen, I am already the choice. And in that quiet certainty, he begins to question every mask he wears. Who am I when she looks at me this way? What am I hiding? What does she see that I cannot? The power of the mirror is not in showing him his beauty, but in showing him his lack, his missing half, the disowned emotional self. You do not fill it for him, you merely reveal it. And that revelation ignites desire. This is where most women falter. They feel his gaze, and their instinct is to perform, to hold the mirror steady in a way that pleases him, that keeps the reflection beautiful. But in doing so, they step out of power and into persona. They become the mask he needs, not the mystery that moves him. The woman of depth, however, allows the cracks to show. She does not compete with the projection, she dissolves it. When he calls her perfect, she smiles, not in flattery, but in quiet knowing. She understands that perfection is the enemy of truth. So she lets the illusion die. And as it dies, he feels the sting of loss, the terror of reality. He feels alive again. This is the paradox of desire. He does not crave the woman who feeds his fantasy. He craves the woman who shatters it, because only through her does he feel the pulse of something real. To be that woman, you must no longer flinch at your own shadow. You must see your jealousy, your fear, your hunger, and hold them like sacred animals. Do not cage them. Do not hide them. Integrate them, and they will become your magnetism. Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. You are not here to please. You are here to transform. So stand still. Let him project. Let him dream. Let him lose himself in the mirage of you. And when he finally reaches for the illusion, disappear into your own depths. He will chase the silence that follows for as long as it takes him to understand what he was truly chasing. The lost pieces of himself. That is the mirror. The first key. The awakening of the addictive current. There is a sacred paradox that governs all attraction. What approaches us freely, we take for granted. What withdraws, we long to possess. He feels you most in your absence. Your silence becomes a space in which his projections echo, unanswered. He remembers your stillness more than your words, your restraint more than your affection. Because distance, when born of inner sovereignty, does not repel, it magnifies. The woman who has mastered distance does not use it as punishment. She does not disappear to provoke panic or manipulate attention. Her distance is devotion to self-containment, a ritual of remembering her own center before she offers it to another. In Jungian terms, she has withdrawn her projections. She no longer searches the outer world for the father who never saw her, the lover who never stayed, the approval she never received. She gathers all those scattered fragments and pulls them inward, until her presence feels like gravity. When a man encounters that kind of self-possession, he feels something he cannot name. It is not rejection, it is mystery. The same mystery that draws sailors toward the ocean's horizon, though they know it may swallow them whole. He senses your distance not as coldness, but as containment. You are not emotionally absent. You are emotionally disciplined. You feel everything, yet you do not collapse into it. You love deeply, but you do not dissolve in the loving. And it is this balance between tenderness and restraint that intoxicates him. Because most women he has known have chased connection like air. They spoke love before they even felt it, gave before they were asked, revealed before they were understood. Their giving came from fear, fear of losing, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough. But you do not give from fear. You give from overflow. He cannot consume what you do not abandon. He cannot claim what you have not forsaken. And so his desire for you becomes an ache that grows each time you return to yourself. Emotional distance is not a wall. It is a mirror of maturity. It tells him, you may come close, but not at the expense of my soul. It says, I am available but not absorbable. In that space, something profound happens. He begins to feel himself again. Your restraint forces him to confront the void within, the restless child who still seeks constant soothing. And as he faces that discomfort, something shifts. The relationship ceases to be a stage for dependency and becomes a crucible for individuation. For Jung, individuation was the process by which a person becomes whole. The integration of shadow, persona, anima, animus, ego, and self into one living truth. And in the dance of attraction, your distance is the fire that fuels his transformation. When you refuse to merge prematurely, you invite him to meet his own inner feminine, his anima, rather than project her onto you. He cannot complete himself through you. He must awaken within himself. Your silence teaches him that. And yet, there is an art to this silence. Too much of it and it becomes cruelty, too little and it becomes noise. The feminine mastery lies in dynamic presence, the ability to pull away without disconnecting, to step back while the heart remains open, to withdraw your body, but not your empathy. Think of it as lunar gravity. The moon does not chase the tide, it pulls it gently, invisibly from afar. That is your power. To move without movement, to affect without effort. He will feel it. He will notice when you no longer reach out first, when your energy softens from pursuit into stillness. At first, his ego will rebel. He will test, provoke, try to draw you back into the pattern where he felt safe, the pattern where you needed him more than he needed you. But the woman who has met her own aloneness cannot be coerced. Her solitude is not punishment, it is sovereignty. When he finally realizes you will not chase, he begins to chase himself. His thoughts, his feelings, the emptiness that once hid behind your devotion. He finds himself wondering, why can't I stop thinking about her? Why does her silence feel louder than anyone else's words? It is because your absence has become his mirror once again. Every man who encounters a woman of depth must face the same trial. To either rise into her level of consciousness or retreat into the comfort of distraction. And those who rise never forget the woman who made them rise. Your distance becomes his initiation. It burns away his illusions, forces his ego to kneel before the truth. That love is not possession, and attention is not connection. He learns, painfully, beautifully, that the only way to meet a woman like you is to meet himself first. That is the art of emotional distance. It is not withholding. It is worship of self, of silence, of sacred polarity. When you understand this, you no longer beg for closeness. You become the horizon he sails toward endlessly, not because you are out of reach, but because every time he thinks he has reached you, you have already become something deeper. Beneath every form of desire lies a wound. Every heartbeat that races for another carries the echo of something older, a cry that once went unanswered, a touch that never came. He calls it attraction. You call it chemistry. But the psyche knows it as recognition, the unconscious finding its counterpart in the same familiar ache. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious rules us from within. And so, most people love not from freedom, but from compulsion. They love to heal what was never seen, to touch what was never held, to reclaim what childhood once took away. The feminine, especially, feels this inheritance deeply. She is taught to equate love with merging, affection with safety, surrender with worth. She learns early to mold herself around others' needs, to earn connection through caretaking, through empathy, through self-erasure. Her shadow does not wear anger, it wears need. And the world praises her for it. But what happens when that need meets a man's distance? When she gives, and he grows colder, not closer. When her heart becomes an offering he never asked for, and her warmth only feeds his detachment, she suffers. And in that suffering, her shadow begins to whisper, "If I can make him love me, I will finally be enough." But that is the oldest illusion of all. Because what she truly wants is not him. It is relief. Relief from the endless hunger to be seen. Relief from the echo of absence. Relief from the ghost of abandonment still clinging to her ribs. And yet, this pain is sacred. For the woman who dares to face it rather than flee, it begins the real initiation. She stops performing love as escape and begins to explore love as mirror. She sees that her obsession was never with him. It was with the version of herself that believed she was unworthy without him. She recognizes that his withdrawal is not rejection, it is revelation. He is showing her the exact place where her own self-love has yet to grow roots. This is shadow work in its purest form. Not affirmations or surface healing, but descending into the ache without trying to fix it. Sitting in the hunger until it loses its power to humiliate. When she no longer fears her own need, something extraordinary happens. The energy of that need, once desperate and grasping, turns magnetic. It becomes gravity rather than grasping. Stillness rather than chase. Because now she no longer reaches out from emptiness. She radiates from fullness. And this fullness pulls him back like the tide to the moon. Men are not addicted to women who need them. They are addicted to women who accept their own need and no longer demand rescue from it. Because that kind of woman mirrors back to them their own unhealed dependency. She shows them, without words, that true intimacy begins where control ends. He will feel it before he understands it. The shift in your energy, the absence of pursuit. He may test it, withdraw further, go silent, disappear into the old game of power. But you do not chase, because you have met your shadow and no longer fear its hunger. You have made peace with solitude. And that peace becomes your seduction. Every great myth speaks of this descent. Inanna into the underworld. Persephone into Hades. Each feminine archetype must die to her innocence before she can rise as queen. For innocence is not purity, it is unconsciousness. And the queen is nothing if not awake. To awaken is to see how the shadow of need becomes your greatest teacher. It teaches you to hold tension without collapsing. To desire without demanding. To love without losing yourself. And when you reach that point, when your need no longer frightens you, men will feel it. They will sense your calm even in silence, your openness even in solitude. Because you are no longer seeking completion, you are embodying it. He may not understand it consciously, but his body knows. It knows the difference between the woman who wants to be chosen and the woman who has already chosen herself. The former becomes temporary comfort. The latter becomes obsession. The energy of a woman who has integrated her shadow cannot be ignored. It is not loud. It is not desperate. It moves like smoke, slow, inevitable, holy. He will remember your gaze when he lies awake at night, wondering why your absence feels heavier than any presence he has ever known. He will recall your stillness, your unhurried breath, the way you held space for your own pain without asking him to save you from it. Because in that, he saw something he did not yet possess. Emotional freedom. And emotional freedom is the rarest form of beauty. This is the third key. The shadow of need transformed into power. The hunger no longer hidden, but hallowed. The woman who walks through this fire becomes untouchable, not because she cannot be hurt, but because even her pain has become sacred. There is a moment in every alchemical process when the vessel must break. The fire grows too hot, the pressure too great. And in that shattering, the true substance is revealed. So it is with the feminine soul. After the descent through need and shadow, after every illusion of control has burned away, she discovers what remains, the abyss, that quiet, endless depth inside her that feels both terrifying and infinite. It is not emptiness. It is potential, unshaped and unclaimed. It is where desire ceases to chase and begins to draw. Men sense this abyss long before they can name it. They feel it in the stillness behind her eyes, in the pause before she answers, in the way she moves as though time itself has slowed to meet her. It unsettles them because it carries the weight of the unknown. And the unknown has always been the most seductive force in the human psyche. Jung wrote that the feminine represents the unconscious itself, the dark water beneath the surface of consciousness, the realm of dreams, intuition, and instinct. When a woman embodies that depth, she becomes not merely desirable but archetypal. She awakens in a man the same awe and fear he once felt before the mysteries of nature. But this power demands a price: solitude. To hold the abyss, she must become comfortable with silence that others mistake for distance, with solitude that others call loneliness. She must trust that emptiness is not loss, but gestation. When she stands in that stillness, she begins to emit a different kind of signal, not the call of pursuit, but the invitation of presence. She no longer tries to be understood. She allows herself to be felt. This is where desire turns into devotion. For the man who encounters this energy realizes that to know her, he must descend into his own depths. He cannot reach her through charm or conquest. He must strip away the armor of his persona, shed the ego that seeks to define. He must feel. That is why the feminine abyss both fascinates and frightens him. It calls him home to his own unconscious, the parts he keeps locked away. And in that calling, his soul trembles. You can see it in his eyes when he looks at you too long. The flicker between attraction and fear. The silent plea, stay, but don't swallow me whole. He senses that loving you means facing himself. And that is the rarest form of desire, the one that heals and destroys at once. But to sustain that tension, you must never collapse your depth to make him comfortable. Do not fill silence with explanation. Do not soften mystery with confession. Let the unknown remain unknown, because it is the unknown that keeps the psyche alive. In a world addicted to noise, a woman who can dwell in silence becomes a revolution. She speaks through presence rather than persuasion, through gaze rather than gesture. Her energy says, come closer if you dare, but understand, here you will meet yourself. That is the invitation of the abyss. It does not chase, it receives. It receives every projection, every fantasy, every attempt to possess, and returns nothing but reflection. And this reflection changes him. Slowly, his desire shifts from wanting to own her to wanting to understand her, from chasing pleasure to seeking truth. He begins to realize that what he truly craves is not her body but the state of being she represents, the state of wholeness, of depth, of grounded power. Yet even as he reaches, she remains rooted in her own darkness. Not withholding, but complete. That completeness becomes the gravitational center of the relationship. She does not demand pursuit, but she inspires it, because the psyche is drawn to what it cannot yet integrate. There is a beauty in that endless longing, for it keeps both souls awake. He becomes addicted not to her touch, but to the transformation she evokes in him. And she, in turn, finds reflection in his striving, the masculine energy reaching toward her like sunlight toward the ocean floor. To stand as the abyss is not to dominate, it is to contain. It is to hold the dance of attraction without losing form, to embody stillness so vast that everything else begins to orbit around it. This is the fourth key. The moment the feminine stops seeking to be understood, and instead becomes the mystery that teaches through presence. In that depth he cannot help but fall, not because she ensnares him, but because he recognizes in her the very thing he has forgotten in himself, the endless, unknowable, sacred dark. But what he cannot resist is your absence echoing inside him like a half-remembered dream. It is not rejection that makes him ache, it is the mystery of not knowing. Not knowing what you think when you look at him. Not knowing whether your silence hides softness or storm. Not knowing if he has reached your soul or merely brushed its surface. Men are drawn not to certainty, but to edges. To that trembling line between warmth and distance, light and shadow. When you live from your wholeness, when your heart contains both the nurturer and the wild thing, the saint and the seductress, he feels something ancient awaken in him. A longing not merely for your body, but for the mirror of his forgotten self. In Jungian terms, this is the moment when your anima meets his animus, when your embodied intuition reflects his hidden ideal. You do not become what he desires, you reveal what he has disowned. That is why he cannot look away. That is why, even as he tells himself he has moved on, some invisible thread keeps pulling him back. He is not chasing you, he is chasing the version of himself that only exists in your presence. Because in you, he sees his own undeveloped soul. The one that feels, the one that dreams, the one that remembers how to worship something greater than logic. You awaken his lost interior world. And he, unknowingly, becomes a pilgrim. But remember this, pilgrims often mistake the temple for the goddess. They fall to their knees before beauty, not realizing beauty was only the doorway to their own resurrection. When a woman understands this, she becomes unshakable. She stops begging for love because she sees that she is the labyrinth, the path he walks to meet himself again. And here lies the fourth key, the key of archetypal containment. Containment does not mean control. It is not manipulation, nor detachment in disguise. It is the quiet mastery of your own emotional field. It is the ability to hold without collapsing, to feel his projections hit you and still remain a mirror, clean, clear, unwavering. When he projects his desires, his fears, his mother wound, his shame, you feel them, but you do not become them. You let the energy move through you like wind through silk. That is containment, and it is irresistible. Because in a world where everyone reacts, the one who can receive without losing herself is the one who commands the deepest fascination. He may test you unconsciously. He may provoke distance, silence, contradiction. It is not cruelty, it is instinct. He is searching for the boundary, the edge that tells him, "This woman is not my fantasy. She is her own realm." Each time you remain rooted in your stillness, you show him that his storm cannot unmake you, that your worth does not tremble under his moods, that your silence is not emptiness, it is choice. And that is when his desire shifts from curiosity to addiction. Because now he feels something he cannot intellectualize. The gravity of your essence. A pull that isn't about pleasure or power or conquest. It's about return, the sacred longing to come home to what feels eternal. In the 50th, the key of emotional sovereignty. The feminine learns the art of holding her own emotional temperature. It means not waiting for him to validate your feelings, not needing him to define your worth, not giving your peace to his storms. You understand that your emotions are currents, not commands. You swim through them with grace, not panic. And he watches you, stunned. Because for the first time, he sees a woman whose heart is not a battlefield, but an ocean, vast, untamed, unknowable. You don't hide your feelings, you inhabit them. You let sadness speak in poetry, anger speak in truth, love speak in silence. There is no performance, only presence. And that presence, that full ownership of emotion, creates the magnetic field that men mistake for magic. But this sovereignty is not born from coldness. It is born from integration, from the shadow work that carved you into wisdom, from the nights you sat alone with your pain, refusing to run, refusing to numb, until the pain revealed its secret gift, clarity. You have met your shadow, the jealous one, the needy one, the one that begs. You have sat with her until she softened, until she trusted you. And now she no longer rules you, she walks beside you. That's why your energy feels calm, not because you are emotionless, but because you are whole. And wholeness is the rarest perfume. It doesn't beg to be noticed, yet everyone turns toward it. The sixth key is surrender without loss. This is the paradox that few understand. To surrender is not to submit. It is to open, with discernment, with dignity, with depth. To let the masculine penetrate your world, not as a conqueror, but as a guest in your temple. When you surrender from fear, you dissolve. When you surrender from strength, you ignite. The difference lies in whether you have already met yourself. If your inner masculine, your discipline, your boundaries, your purpose, stands firm within you, then your surrender is not weakness, it is alchemy. It transforms him, because in your softness, he finds reflection for his buried tenderness. In your openness, he feels permission to be more human. In your trust, he remembers the ancient rhythm of devotion. Surrender is the feminine form of leadership, quiet, invisible, divine. And finally comes the seventh key, the death of the need to be chosen. This is where all illusions dissolve. Where the game ends, the performance drops, the archetypes burn in their own beauty. When the feminine no longer seeks validation through being desired, she becomes desire itself. Not an object, but a force. Not a woman who waits, but a woman through whom life moves. He can no longer define her, because she has become the undefinable. Her power lies not in what she does, but in what she is. And what she is, cannot be taken, cannot be lost, cannot be forgotten. She doesn't chase because she knows. Everything meant for her must rise to meet her frequency. Everything less will fade under the light of her truth. He will sense it even in your silence. The way you no longer vibrate with need. The way your absence hums like a prayer. He will feel the pull, not because you called him, but because you released him. And in that release, he finds himself circling back, haunted by the question that has no answer. Why does her peace feel like gravity? Because peace, my dear, is the highest seduction. It is the final Jungian paradox, that what the masculine most craves is not possession, but union with what cannot be possessed. You become his initiation, the mirror that demands his evolution, the silence that unravels his ego, the mystery that reminds him there are still gods worth trembling before. And that is how you unlock his addictive desire, not through manipulation, not through strategy, but through embodiment. You become the myth he cannot stop chasing, because within your gaze, he meets both his heaven and his hell. The music slows. A deep breath lingers in the quiet between words. The light falls softer now, as though the universe itself has leaned closer to listen. And there she stands, not a woman waiting to be chosen, but a woman who has already chosen herself. Her story was never about him. It was about the mirror he unknowingly offered. It was about the awakening of her own reflection. The moment she realized she was never missing anything at all. Every gaze, every heartbreak, every silence. It was all initiation. A sacred rehearsal for her becoming. The cosmos, disguised as desire, teaching her how to remember her wholeness. So let him feel the absence. Let him taste the ache of your distance. Because what he is truly craving now is not your body. It's the frequency of your freedom. That is the flavor of the divine feminine. The one who loves deeply, but bows to no illusion. If you are listening now, let these words settle in your bones. Let them become the architecture of your silence, the pulse beneath your calm, the breath inside your worth. You are not here to compete for affection. You are here to awaken remembrance. To walk as the living embodiment of paradox. Tender yet unyielding, soft yet sovereign. The storm and the stillness both. And if the world has ever told you that your intensity was too much, that your depth was inconvenient, smile. Because those who fear your depth are not meant to swim in your ocean. They are meant to watch from shore and learn what devotion looks like. When it has no owner. Now close your eyes. Feel the space between your ribs. That quiet, sacred place where your power hums like electricity. That is you. That is your homecoming. Every man who meets you from this moment forward will meet that energy, not the mask, not the need, not the wound, but the woman who remembers who she is. And he will not understand it at first. He will call it mystery, magic, maybe madness. But you will know, it is simply the truth, finally unhidden. And if these words found you tonight, if they stirred something ancient and electric inside you, remember that stirring is not about him. It is about the part of you that is ready to rise, to step into the full symphony of your worth, to become not the seeker, but the source. So take this as your invocation, to move through the world like the temple you are, to stop chasing the fire, and start becoming the flame. Headphone if you felt the resonance of this journey, if this language of shadow and soul speaks to something unspoken within you. Stay close. Subscribe to this channel, and let these words continue to find you where logic ends and mystery begins. Each week we descend a little deeper into Jungian alchemy, feminine embodiment. The quiet art of becoming unforgettable. Because you were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt. So breathe, rise, and remember, the most magnetic thing you can ever become is a woman who no longer needs to be desired to feel divine. He will desire you most when you are finally whole enough to no longer need him to.